Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, from seats at the cabinet table to a rump of just 8 MPs, the Liberal Democrats have experienced a pretty devastating reversal of fortune. But their new-ish leader, Tim Farron, insists that liberalism has a bright future. So how is the fight back going? He joins me from his constituency in South Cumbria. Good morning, Mr Farron.
Morning, Andrew.
Now, it's reported in today's papers the Liberal Democrats are looking at having shortlists for seats of only ethnic minorities or only gay people or only disabled people. Is that accurate?
Well, the Liberal Democrat conference in March will be looking at a range of possibilities, and it's all about trying to make sure that those people who represent us in the various parliaments and assemblies around the UK and in Europe reflect the diversity of the communities that are out there. I think, let's be honest, you mentioned the number of MPs that we have. Every single one of them is a white male, and I'm somebody who thinks you've got to do this in a liberal way, but I'm also somebody who says you can't turn your back on the fact that we've clearly not succeeded as a party, at the top at least, in reflecting that diversity. So it's good to look at those options. But the thing about the Liberal Democrats, as all our new members are finding out, is we are very, very democratic, and the leader doesn't get to tell people exactly what they do. So I'm very interested in some of these moves. I'm very supportive of and determined to get a much more diverse representation in the party. But the party conference, the members, will make that decision.
But this is a new level of positive discrimination. We haven't seen it before. So I am interested in your view. I mean, under this proposal, for instance, if you want to represent the Liberal Democrats from South Manchester or wherever, you might have to be gay or transgender. Is that really liberal?
No, if you look at, so a couple of things. First of all, there's lots for us to learn at the moment from our friends and comrades over the water in Canada, the Liberal Party there, who had a very similar problem, and twice over, I should say. They were hammered into a very poor position in an election a few years ago. They rebuilt, and they're now back in government with a majority. They also had an issue with diversity and, frankly, too many white blokes and not enough of everything else, and so they had quite an inventive idea of grouping constituencies together, where in 4 constituencies you'd have to make sure that at least one of them selected someone from a black or minority ethnic background, and 2 would be women, and so on. But these are not things that are diktats from me. These are things we're discussing at our conference in March. I think the reality is, you were hinting earlier on, really, if you look at all of our candidates at the last general election, we were probably just about as diverse as anybody else. The problem the Liberal Democrats have had, even when we've had bigger numbers of MPs, is actually getting those people elected, and I think that is the thing that I need to focus on.
Is this idea of black and ethnic minority in itself not a bit offensive? It's been suggested this week. For instance, what about Chinese people? What about Korean people and so forth? Don't you need to break things, if you want real diversity, don't you need to break it down much more?
Well, these are the things we'll be discussing, and I think it's right that we do so. It's also right to remember that you get the balance right, because, of course, you know, setting a diktat is not the right way of doing these things. But, you know, let's be honest and give some credit. The Labour Party in the mid-1990s, they took some very muscular action when it came to gender equality, and actually, to be fair to them back then, I think they changed the nature of the House of Commons, and other parties have followed suit. So I think I'm a liberal, but I think if there's inequality, then you should step in and try and sort it out.
Would you like to trump them by being the first party with a trans MP?
I think it's not about trumping anybody. It's about making sure you represent properly and reflect the diversity of the society we live in. And for certain, 50% of, or maybe I think it's more than 50% of the people in the United Kingdom are women. And the fact that they are so underrepresented and that we have no women MPs amongst the 8 that we have is something that I find, you know, frankly embarrassing, and it's not right. And so it's important that we intervene and get things right, not to be able to make a point to other parties, but just to do the right thing.
Now, one of your other great crusades as a party has always been the EU. What do you make of David Cameron's negotiation? You must at some level be quite pleased with it. Think he's done quite well?
Well, I'm supportive of there being a renegotiation, and I'm supportive of of him getting something that he feels he can come back to the Tory party and, more importantly, the British people and sell. I think it's interesting, the conversations that we've had this morning, both on this matter and with Douglas Carswell talking about the various different branches of the Leave campaign, they both kind of ignore the main thing, because I don't think most people who will be making their mind up in the referendum will make it up on the basis of the detail of David Cameron's referendum or the personnel involved in the campaigns. What they will do is look at the big questions, and that's what frustrates me. That's what we ought to be talking about. Is it in Britain's interest to be inside or outside the world's biggest market? In these really dangerous and quite frightening times, is it better to seek the security of being alongside your closest friends and neighbours? And when you're dealing with enormous global crises, challenges like the economy, refugee crisis, climate change, are we better off doing it together with others or on our own? And I say that list because that's really those are the big lofty issues on which most people will make their mind up, and not really the kind of fairly grainy detail of what David Cameron comes back from Brussels with.
You've been very critical of the Prime Minister in terms of the number of refugees this country has taken so far. What is the right number in your view, roughly? Well,
it's a lot more than none. A lot more than none. I mean,
so is it about a million like Germany?
First of all, the figure that I have given him, the figure that I've given him and asked for repeatedly is that he takes 3,000 orphaned refugees from the camps within Europe. It's important to look at this in two ways. One, and most importantly, is on the humanitarian side. I mean, Joseph Stalin once, rather chillingly said that one death is a tragedy and a million is a statistic. And I'm afraid I think the Prime Minister and other European leaders potentially are treating this as a set of statistics. And yes, and in other words, looking at the scale of the problem and not looking at the humanitarian reality of, people I met on the beach in Lesbos, children I met in the camp at Calais, and these people are not on the whole, coming here as economic migrants. These are people fleeing from war and persecution. And Europe has, I think in 2014 had 190,000 refugees. That was a record since the Second World War. This last year, 2015, it was 1 million refugees. It could be 3 million this year. And even that's only, a fifth, a quarter of those who are fleeing from the conflicts in and around the Middle East. So the scale of the problem is massive, and our Prime Minister is not taking action.
Tim Farron, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.